We are these soul-led, intuitive beings that have access to so much rich information and guidance. When we are listening and living through our intuition, we're also weaving the thread that is our thread in the greater tapestry of the beautiful future. Our intuition holds the intelligence that we need to trust enough to bring home to this world. Hello and welcome to The Future is Beautiful. How are you feeling? Some of you may be feeling inspired and creative, ready to get to work and bring what you need to 2021. Others of you may be feeling blue and run down and trapped, or anywhere in between. It's okay wherever you are on this spectrum. No need for any guilt or shame as you find your way through this month. This week we have a special episode for you, which is called Ask Me Anything. I have been wanting to do one of these for ages, as I absolutely love these episodes on some of the podcasts that I listen to. And so thank you for sending in your questions. I originally recorded answers to all of them, but it was very long, so we cut some of them out. And perhaps I will answer those ones in the next show if you enjoy this episode and you want to do more of them in the future. From next week, we are back with some inspiring interview-style conversations for the rest of this series. If you are interested in the beautiful leadership immersion, you can take part in this now. We begin a new 13-week journey soon. Enrollment closes on the 18th of January, with the opening ceremony taking place the following week. We have 7 core modules where I offer a workshop on these themes. They are redefining leadership and worth, shadows, trauma and liberation, sacred activism and decolonization, embodiment and biohacking, vision, intuition and edge walking, creativity, cultural futurism and flow consciousness, and collaboration and community. Along the way, you receive other inspirations and missions which nudge you to bring the tools and learnings into the world in your local environment. I know that online courses can be tough to follow, and so I've tried to make it fun as well as deep, and we have some live community sessions as well as parts that you can watch in your own time. If you're a little uncomfortable with the word leader, this is likely for you. A space to recognize the importance of what you have to offer the world, as well as find ways to connect more to your worth, your dharma, your creativity, or simply the confidence to bring more of who you really are into this world and into what you are already doing. We then have a wonderful guest faculty of teachers from this very podcast, offering a fresh and masterful perspective on what it is to be a beautiful leader. If you want to go deeper into clearing your own subconscious patterns and awaken your own gifts, new ways of being and intuition, you can do this alongside with the Presence Leadership Mentoring, where we will have one-to-one sessions every 2 weeks over a 13-week period. If you want to find out more about this, simply head to our website, www.thefutureisbeautiful.co, and click on courses. Thank you to each of you that has been supporting my book. The early orders are so important for authors, and we all know how important it is to support authors of colour as well. So please do order your copy now. We launch in the US and Canada next week, so you can pre-order it and be one of the first to receive a copy. If you already have a copy, please do share the book on your social media, in your Instagram stories or Instagram posts, or do an Amazon review and tell people about the book so that they can discover it and benefit from the principles and the practices shared there. If you go to www.amisha.co.uk/intuition, you can also register to get a gift package for supporting the book with some great workshops and the PDF of the extra chapter that I wrote for the book. I hope that you enjoy this episode, where the questions range from intuition to archetypes to leadership. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Ghadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. My first question is from Kiran, who asks if I like Marmite. The answer to that is yes, I love Marmite. I actually do like little dabs of it and then very thinly, gently spread it. Yeah, it's a favorite of mine. And Tiu wants to know what is my favorite hot drink. I would say at the moment, I have 3. One of them is cacao with reishi and lion's mane mushrooms, like a little blend of different mushrooms, adaptogens, and maybe some maca in there and some raw honey with some oat milk. And that's a good one. I also am really into having turmeric with some oat milk or almond milk. And so, yeah, big fan of hot drinks. Moving to the next question, which is from Sam. What makes an episode most beautiful for you? I love this question. When an episode is really beautiful, it's all about connection. It's because I felt a real deep sense of connection with my guest, that we, really took the time to be present, and you can feel that they really want to be there and that they're open. And we create this almost ceremonial space together for this podcast. And then from that, the conversation arises, and it's always beautiful. It's always of the heart. It's always deep. It's always unafraid. It's not trying to be anything or prove anything or force anything. It's very sweet and often vulnerable. I feel that those episodes, I used to do this show always with people in person, and that always led to this like beautiful level of connection. And then now, of course, we're a year into doing them through Zoom remotely, and we've managed to connect in that same way with that real depth. And often you forget that you're not in the same place. You feel transported into each other's worlds. You're creating this whole other space and experience together. In that space, you hear truth. And so for me, that's a beautiful episode. The ones that I've struggled with a little bit, which wasn't exactly the question, but I guess when I've struggled with an episode with a guest, it's often been that they don't want to give the full amount of time to the episode. They want to get it done quickly. They just want to jump straight in. They don't want to kind of connect a bit first. Sometimes they're not prepared, like they're in a place, like they're in their car or they're rushing around, and I find that those ones tend to connect more to that like autopilot place of people just saying the things that they normally say. What makes an episode really beautiful for me is when we open up this space and the words coming through both me and my guest are words that neither of us have spoken before. And so there's something being birthed, being created that is of that moment. And that is always beautiful. I would be so curious to hear what makes an episode most beautiful for you. So if you have any thoughts or expressions around that, please do write in and share it with me and the team. We would love to know. I know by nature that because our episodes, are deep, it's not the kind of show that people do a lot of like commenting on, because it kind of touches you in that place that's yeah, it's not so easy even to almost understand what's happened. And I know some of you share that you listen to episodes over and over again. I would love to know what it is that makes an episode beautiful for you. Anna Gret would like to know, what is my favorite part of my book Intuition, or what part am I most excited about from the writing? It's hard to say because, of course, it's such a there's such a wholeness to a book. I really enjoyed writing the extra chapter, Playing in the Wild Fields of Trust, that's not in the physical book, but it's in the audiobook, in the Audible version. You can also, if you've bought the physical book, if you go to amisha.co.uk/intuition, you can sign up for the gift package and you get the PDF. And that was really beautiful to write, because I shared more of my personal story in there. I shared more about my own relationship with intuition, how it's developed and how I learn from it. And I share stories, of my childhood and some of the experiences that I've had, and my relationship with my father, and my relationship with coming into that place of trust and living a life through my intuition. So that's definitely a favorite part. In the actual book, the trust section I find really beautiful. And what happened with this section, this principle, so the book has 9 principles and 53 practices in it. The principles take you towards trust. And trust's always the biggest question. How do I trust my intuition? How do I know if it's really my intuition? How do I listen? And what was really beautiful about this principle is, as some of you may know, I was writing this book during the first lockdown in the spring of 2020. As we were coming out of that lockdown, I went to go and visit my parents, and I was still finishing the book. I was still writing the practices, and the book was going to print in a few weeks' time. And my father ended up dying very suddenly during that time. And the week, well, about 3-4 days before he died, the book was going to be Americanized, and I was kind of finishing the practices, finishing the principles, all in that week leading up to his death. And then the edits were coming through as well. So, and then they were being, really locked in. And so all that happened when I was in that liminal space, and in that space of real contemplation and presence. It's like a space where you're beyond your normal human capacity, your everyday capacity. I had so much focus on the book and what needed to happen for the book. And as well as that, we were making podcasts, and I was present with my father. And that was in itself a whole experience of a rewiring of my psyche, as well as witnessing him and really seeing his life from his perspective rather than from mine. I don't remember now what the original words were for the trust principle, but what I do remember is that as I was reading it, I had it printed out and I was sitting next to him reading it, and I was like, oh, this isn't right. And I needed to rejig it and then rejig it again. And then I just actually rewrote the entire principle and sent it off to my editing team at DK, and they were really happy with it. And I feel like it's really beautiful, and it speaks to that essence of what trust is. I won't read you the whole principle, but I'll read you the very last little section of it, which is called Evolving Through Trust. Often in life, we meet the same kinds of challenges in different disguises. There is a powerful analogy of life being like a spiral staircase. You are climbing up this staircase and you see the same wallpaper on the walls, but simply from a different viewpoint. It's not the same, yet it is familiar. Your challenges can feel like this. I thought I'd already resolved this one. Ever had that kind of feeling? There is a fine line between getting stuck and repeating patterns unnecessarily and evolving through the pattern so you understand it differently each time. Trust allows you to hold where you have come from and where you are going, all in the present moment. It allows you to live with courage, resilience, and sovereignty. Trust means that you connect to a happiness or sense of peace in yourself that is not dependent on circumstances. You are able to trust in who you are, why you are here, and what you are learning. You find the simple pleasure of being you, whether it's a good day, bad day, or a really mediocre one. Your life isn't waiting for certain things to happen in order for you to be happy. You have cultivated a sense of joy, purpose, and trust in your life from your intuition, and that makes every day count. From here, life's mystery is an exciting place. You don't know what's going to happen, but you trust in your role. Your intuition will guide you to do whatever supports your highest truth. This takes the fear out of life and worry out of what will happen, and instead opens you up to living life beautifully. As you do this with true humility and grace, you will be a sacred activist, stitching your threads into the weave of our beautiful future. My next question is from Maxime, and it is, what is your experience of working with archetypes? And this is a great question. I have found archetypes to be very powerful. In particular, I've worked a lot with the goddess archetype and the priestess archetype. I did a priestess initiation training some years ago, which really helped me kind of connect to that sense of the medicine woman, the wild woman. And the work with the goddesses has been really profound for me in terms of connecting with the Hindu pantheon of goddesses such as Durga, Lakshmi, Kali. I'll come back to that in a second, because it's also, it's not just these archetypes of like the feminine or the more kind of beautiful. I found the fool archetype to be very powerful. And we've had some conversations on this podcast about the fool before. I used to do this thing called the Spiritual Playground, which was curated and created by my friend Luce Baker, who shared a bit about this at the Style and Presence Summit. And she had this idea that we would have 13 deities or belief systems and that we'd come together for this sort of cosmic area at festivals. We did this at the Secret Garden Party for a few years. It was called the Spiritual Playground, and it was this bringing together of the sacred and the profane. And we had hilarious things. There was a whole kind of lineup. So Luce played Jesus, and then there were two sisters. There was Merlinji, the mixed race medicine man. There was a Yoni and a Lingam. There was Hanuman. There was a superhero called Captain Lavender. We had the American Dream. We had Gluten, the Antichrist. I played the goddess Lakshmi, and we just had a really fun time in that kind of like dance where, well, we had a dance. We had a really incredible dance routine to that song, Take Me to Church. It's not on video anywhere, but if there was a video, I would love to watch that one day. So if you have one, do let me know. Maybe you were there and recorded it on your phone. And we would play with all these different kind of ceremonies. So we used to do the sixth element puja, and the sixth element was kale. And we'd have everyone chanting, "All hail the kale." We used to do Praise Be to Be, where we would sing Beyonce songs as if they were mantras, and we'd have everyone chanting together. And so just these really like fun ways of playing with that which is sacred and that which is silly, the entertainer, and how the fool can pretend to be doing something, can be like messing with you and can just kind of catch you like a little bit off guard where something really happens. the Fool as an archetype has been a powerful one in lightening everything up and understanding humor as a pathway to understanding ourselves. What's been really powerful for me about archetypes in general is that we understand that we are not just who we are, like as in the box that we've been put in. And so I do this work with the goddesses called Wild Grace. And the premise of that really is that, you know, perhaps you've been told, okay, you're the quiet one, or you're the loud one, or you're the sensitive one, or whatever. You've been put in a box. And then you might live your life in that box, feeling that that's who you are. What I love about the archetypes is that we all have all of the archetypes in us, and we might have certain ones that are more natural or they've been nurtured the most in our childhood. But actually, we can nurture any of these archetypes if we want to. And so it's amazing taking people through an experience where, you know, we might be in that space of Kali, the fearlessness, the wildness, the grotesque, that protectress, and somebody who's really shy and maybe is like really normally very nice will feel that they don't have that energy. And then when you see it wake up in someone and you see it's like a whole part of that human being comes online, and you discover that, you know, we are not just these very, you know, simple, easy to describe humans. Like, we are so complex and we have all of these different aspects in us. And so for me, you know, I will call on different goddesses or deities in my practice. And part of my practice is through mantra. And so, for example, Durga, for me, I've shared the myth of Durga before on this podcast. And she, for me, is the activist. And, you know, she is courage. And she is motivated from that power of love, and she can face any battle that is coming her way. And so when I chant Om Dum Durgaye Namaha, Om Dum Durgaye Namaha, it opens up that part of me. And even when I do the mudras, which are sacred hand gestures, in order to connect to certain archetypal deity energies, I feel that part of myself waking up. And it's very powerful to know that you can open parts of yourself as they're needed. And, you know, maybe that are specific for a particular situation, and that we can enjoy getting to know these aspects of ourselves and expressing these aspects of ourselves. And so it's very powerful to feel like the Kali energy in your body, to feel that power and that fearlessness and that wildness and that connection. Likewise, it's really beautiful to connect to Lakshmi, for example, and feel that abundant nature of your soul, or to connect to Saraswati and feel the wisdom and the creativity flowing through you. This is super powerful. And I would have to say that what I find really incredible about it, and I've worked with a lot of people in this way, in the retreats, the Wild Grace retreats, they're women only, but I've worked with the archetypes with women and men, and you see these aspects of them coming out. You feel it in the room, you see it in their eyes, you see it in what comes forth. It is beautiful. People talk a lot about polyamory, and my experiences of being called into a polyamorous relationship was that it was like, I want you to be this part, you know, I'm going to invite you to these kinds of events. I'm going to be in relationship with this aspect of you. And I would say, you know, if you really want to be polyamorous with one person. Like, let them be all the expressions of all the archetypes that they are. Allow them to not just be like one particular flavor, but that whole depth and complexity and spectrum is able to be there and be alive. And so, yeah, I mean, that's going to keep you busy. We'll talk about getting bored of each other or knowing somebody so well. And it's like, well, there's always more aspects. That's really fascinating for me, to know that you never really know all of someone, and that you can even go on an exploration together to understand a new archetype, to awaken something new within. Yeah, I love working with archetypes, and I love working with deities and the mythologies, recognizing different aspects of oneself and each other. And so I highly recommend that you go with the archetypes that you're drawn towards and you explore them deeper. At another time in life, you might be called towards a different archetype, and then you can move towards that one and see what that has to offer. Next question. Amy would like to know, how do you balance the activity of keeping yourself informed of what's going on with the great projects and thinkers around the world, with the need for processing time, peace, and quiet, and all the other things you have to do to live a life in this world? She says, I often find my brain at information capacity with all the wonderful ideas and practices out there, but still feeling like there's so much I'm missing. Great question, Amy. I've let go of needing to do all of that. Yeah, how can we ever be fully informed of everything that's going on? Even just to be fully informed of like what's currently in the media, like what the current news stories are, and then to understand like the history and the complexity around each of those issues is a lot. And then we also know that that's a very tiny chunk of like what's going on in the world. There are so many great projects and thinkers. And of course, part of my job on this podcast is to discover and bring some of these people and these projects towards you. I don't do it in a way where there's like a pressure to be doing it completely. I used to be that way, used to be that sense of like, you must like know this and cover that. And now I do it more intuitively. And so I accept that I will never know of every great project, thinker, person in the world. Likewise, I will never fully know everything that's happening in the world and have a informed, current, up-to-date perspective on it. I do my best to connect with news sources, to read things that I find interesting, to watch and listen to things. I move with both my inspiration and my rage, like what it is that I feel is important. I'm always open for being a student and learning something new. I don't mind if I come across something that I've never come across before and there's someone around that can educate me a bit. Yeah, I make the time that I need for myself when I can, because those things that you've said are a full-time life. And then on top of that, we have family and friends and work. And yeah, there's a lot to life. And so I would say letting go of the FOMO, that there's a sense that you're missing out on something, and maybe taking the approach that if you need to know something, you will find it out, whilst also being somewhat diligent. So, not kind of like, I don't mean that in like a really kind of ignorant way of like, oh, if it's meant for me, it will just come to me, because obviously it won't unless you have like channels open for that. It's letting go of a perfect notion of what that balance is, and having, a few sources that you trust open, and giving yourself a break, literally, but also just in your mind and in your relationship with it. Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the global patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members, and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation. My next question is from Chris. He says, it seems everybody with an offering online talks about the community, when it feels to me as if very few of us dipping in and out of these spaces know what it is to genuinely be part of a real community. What do these spaces really mean and represent? When none or very little of the responsibility or accountability of real community exists in these spaces, nor the anchor to geography, what relation, inform, or function do they bear in real life, in-person community? Should we be trying to equate these spaces with community, or using them as a replacement, trying to make them something they perhaps cannot be? Is there another way, if we stop comparing them to offline spaces and free them up to be something different? What are the most inspiring online communities you know of, and what makes them so? Yeah, it's a really good question. And I feel it's one that we are all asking this year. And communities become a real buzzword for people that are selling things. And it's become a word that brands use, that they will have like a community. And you're like, okay, yeah, that exists. We've been using the word community for a long time here on The Future is Beautiful. You have to accept the limitations, right? So this community is an online one. It can't offer the same kind of care as when you're in a shared geography, and more than a shared geography, when your lives are directly affected by something, like whether something works or not and it needs fixing, and everyone has to speak to each other and connect to make that happen. It's very different. I would say I don't compare online communities to in-person communities, and I feel like we need both. And so we need to have the communities that we're part of that are very local, that are very touch, human-based. We're doing stuff with our hands, we're making things, we're relying on each other. I feel like what online community can offer, that it can connect us to people that might share our values, that are in different physical locations. This can really mean that in a space where someone might have felt alone, that they no longer feel alone because they know that there are other people that are sharing similar experiences. And I've seen that in the Future is Beautiful community. Like I've seen recently, there was a conversation actually about in-person communities, and people were setting up phone calls to share experiences so that, they could explore options. They wouldn't have been connected without the online community. They wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet each other. When you are part of an online community that's around values, then you know that there are people that will have experiences and wisdom that you can draw on, or that also might have had similar experiences to you. For example, I'm in like another online group, which is people of color that came together this year around all the Black Lives Matters uprisings and movement. We don't all know each other, but we're having similar experiences in lots of ways. So having a space to vent some of those experiences and to be held in that space by others that understand is really powerful. And if you don't have people in the physical community around you, that can mean a lot. Presence Collective has been really powerful this year, past year during the pandemic. I created it really with a sense of having like an anchor point. So even though it's online, that in those days, you know, if you traveled or moved around, that there was that anchor point, that it could fit easily into your life. But in the pandemic, it's become this really beautiful space that's become so much deeper. People didn't know each other. They came through connection to the podcast and to a desire for these practices and to be part of a group. And real friendships have formed. You know, people have met up and gone for walks, socially distanced walks, or even not. There's a sense of, oh, I know that person when they appear on the screen. And I feel like if you show up wanting it always to be different, and sometimes I'm in spaces where people are like, oh, I just wish, I don't want to talk online. I want to meet up in person. Like, when can we meet up in person? And it's like, well, that takes away from like the present and the possibility. Whereas actually we can enjoy what is available and understand that that connection might be really meaningful for someone at that moment. And so there are people in that community that maybe haven't had access to a lot of people during that time. And so having these online spaces to show up to, where there's a familiarity and a real humanness, it creates that anchor and that sense of belonging and safety. I find there's a community that I love being part of. Yeah, it's interesting because there is real life in-person connections. I don't like using real life as a term because I don't think we can say that what happens on Zoom and in the temple of Zoom is not real, because it is real, because I feel it, a human having a real human experience through these windows of Zoom, and to see it as a window to somebody rather than like a block. But in physical person, touch, space, of course, it's different, but it doesn't mean that it's not real. So I feel like really just acknowledging that is very helpful. Part of my yoga community, when I touch into things online, it does help that we've spent physical time together, and some of those relationships have really grown and flourished offline through past experiences of being on trainings together. And so then there's a sense of home when we show up in the online space. And I love that. I love that I can be with certain teachers and I can be with certain communities. And even more so, the fact that everything's online this year has meant that I can connect into things and communities and people that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do if they were going to their physical spaces and I was going to mine. And so, yeah, I've really actually enjoyed that aspect of it. Another community that I'm part of is a thing called the Community Weavers Guild, which is a community of people that are hosts, weavers of communities. And so we kind of come together to share learnings and experiences. And some people know each other, have met physically and spent time together, and some people haven't. And there's a lot of bigger group aspects, but what I found really powerful is we have these things called home groups where you meet in small groups. I have a home group that I put together with 3 people at the beginning of 2020, end of 2019. And I'd met one of them once for a weekend in person. And the other 2, I didn't know. One of them, I knew a little bit of her work. And anyway, we set up this home group, the 4 of us, and we met every month on Zoom for this whole past year. And we have been on a journey together. You know, we sit there for an hour and a half. Everyone shares. We've really got to know each other and hold space for each other and be part of each other's lives and experiences. And that's been really rich, like a really wonderful part of life. Even at the point where things open up again, I would always keep some of these online spaces because I find them really, really powerful. I find that they're accessible, that you can join with less barriers. You don't need as much time as you would need to travel to an in-person event. you don't necessarily need to be like well or energized to put on a Zoom and connect with people. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it. And so I feel like we need both, but we need to nurture the online communities that we're part of. Saying that, I'm still working out like what the best way is to create the online communities around the Future is Beautiful and presence in a way that it really adds value to people and is that space. But I find for me, one of the things that I know is if I'm part of a community, even if I don't show up to everything, I feel held in that container, and that feels really good. And I know that as a facilitator, that I'm always holding that container. So even if people don't really show up, they're still part of it. There's something happening in those layers. And so that's also interesting for me, how the energetic traces of these communities happen and what they mean. So my penultimate question is from Nancy, and it is, what is the importance of using the word leadership still at this time, as the word has been entrenched in colonial institutions? Do we still need it? Yeah, interesting question. And this comes from the beautiful leadership immersion and presence mentoring, which I call leadership mentoring. It's interesting with these words. I think we have to recognize that a lot of our words have old paradigm sort of colonial roots in the way that they've been used, in the way that they've been developed. And we can make up new words, or we can change the meaning of the words that we have. And for me, the reason that I choose to use the word leadership is because I feel that it does actually tap into that old paradigm sense of the word leader, which makes us sort of sit up and listen. And so if that word helps us to kind of bring that level of importance to the ways in which we show up in the world and the choices that we make and the importance of, what we share and how we spend our time and our money and our energy, if the word leadership helps us connect to the importance of it, then it's a helpful word. And then, of course, we can shift into like, what does really being a leader, a beautiful leader, an authentic leader, a present leader mean at this time? When I worked in sustainability consulting and sustainable fashion, I mean, we were always discussing how the words weren't good enough. And when I started, it was ethical fashion, and then it was eco fashion, and then it was green fashion, and then it was sustainable fashion, and now it's regenerative fashion. And we'll just keep finding another word, but the word's never going to really do the thing justice, because what we want to do is create something that's very different, that isn't based on slavery and exploitation. I feel leadership, it makes it sound important in a way that words like healing or personal development sound like added extras, things that we don't really need, that are nice if you've got the time. But actually, it's really the core of who we are and how our future will be shaped. That's why that word's important, because it anchors us to the very importance of showing up. And my final question is from Carrie, and she has asked, what are some of your very favorite personal morning rituals that set you up for a positive day? I am pretty chilled in my mornings at the moment. I definitely have gone through phases of having, that kind of rolling out of bed with a hangover, to being very, very disciplined with like a lot of different practices that had to happen before I would leave the house or speak to another human being, to coming to a place where I'm pretty chilled about it all. I do my practices, I like to have my lemon water or my turmeric. I like to sit in a space of gratitude and recognition. I like to invite in some stillness. I have made a meditation called Rituals for a Beautiful Morning. And there's another one actually called Rituals for a Beautiful Evening. And you can get them free off my website or on Insight Timer. In those meditations, I've actually brought together like a lot of different rituals and practices in a way that
takes you through a process that really sets you up. So Rituals for a Beautiful Morning is 17 minutes long, and it is a meditation, but it includes visioning and gratitude and setting some intentions and coming into that real state of connection. That is there for you. So please go and enjoy it if you want to have a really beautiful practice that can set you up. And then the evening one has this nice ritual of composting, and so that you can kind of be clear and then create that space to sleep well. And my other favorite practice ritual in the morning or the evening, but the morning it's really good, is just to put on a few songs that really bring the joy and the energy into my body, and then like free dance and just see how my body wants to move and get my heart pumping that way in the morning. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode, this Q&A episode, which we will do again if you found this helpful. If you want to connect deeper, you go to www.thefutureisbeautiful.co or www.amisha.co.uk, and you can find out there about the beautiful leadership immersion and presence mentoring, which the enrollment is open for this season at the moment, only for a few more days. And you can also find out about how to get the book Intuition and the gifts that come along with it. And you can find links to everything else that might be interesting for you. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast and part of this community. We will be back with our usual interviews starting next week. And we look forward to sharing more episodes, revelations, openings, and recommitments with you over this year.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?